Welcome to Meet the Folk Musicians. I'm Jenny Shear, the folklorist with Catskills Folk Connection. In response to the COVID-19 virus and out of respect for the health of tradition bearers and folk artists and staff, we're concentrating on sharing the vibrant folk life of the Catskills online using Catskills Folk Connection's blog, which is www.catskillsfolkconnection, all one word, all lowercase, .blogspot.com, and eventually on a new website. You can visit the blog anytime and will find this series, Meet the Folklorists, with new installments throughout July. You'll also find another series called Meet the Folk Artists, featuring artists whose works will be in an exhibit called Folk Art in Wood that's going to be shown in September. Today's guest is Amy Lieberman, who lives in Treadwell. Welcome, Amy. Glad you're here.
Thank you. It's nice to be virtually with you today.
That's true, virtually, right. For more than a decade, Amy has played with the Tremperskill Boys, the band that provides music and calling for Catskills Folk Connection's square dances. Today, Amy and I are going to talk about how she got involved in music, how she adopted several musical instruments, her other musical involvements, and who might have inspired her in her career in music. So let's get started, Amy. Have you always lived in the Catskills?
I have not, actually. I moved to the Catskills in March of 2008, actually for a job. I had just completed about a month in the Peace Corps, which was a lifelong dream of mine. And unfortunately, it got cut short because my mother became ill and subsequently passed away. But I was, so I was kind of looking for a new career after that, and always loved the Catskills, and fortunately found a job that allowed me to move here.
Well, now, had you always been involved in music? Was that with you when you came to the Catskills?
As a child, my first instrument actually was the recorder. When I was in second grade, we had a local woman who taught a group of us in her house, and that was a good, nice, easy first instrument to learn, but kind of inspired me. The next instrument I picked up was the piano, also by the same teacher, and took lessons with her from third to eighth grade, and that was, I think, a good instrument to learn early on because I got some music theory background as well. I could learn the bass and the treble clef, so that was very helpful. And then in school, in third grade, I joined the school band with the flute.
So flute's your original band instrument.
It is. It is, exactly. Yeah, which I know is near and dear to your heart as well.
It is true. So you played in the elementary band and the junior high band and the high school band?
Yep, all the way through 12th grade, and actually sprinkled in there for a couple of years. I got to play the bassoon with the school band as well, which was quite the opposite of the flute, I have to say, and carrying that on the school bus with me was not easy, but it was an interesting challenge.
Well, you are truly a multi-instrumentalist, and we're not done yet. But what kind of music did you play on the flute in high school?
In high school, we actually did some marching band music. We were never coordinated enough to actually march and play at the same time, but we learned some marching band music for the football games. And we just sat in the bleachers and played that music. But we also did some classical music as well.
That's good. Yeah. So you finished high school playing the flute, having played the piano, and what led you into stringed instruments?
In college, I had the opportunity to take a class on old-time bluegrass and country music, which I know my parents, I was fortunate enough that they helped pay for most of my college. They weren't thrilled that they were spending their money on this, to be honest, but it obviously led to future in music, so it did pay off somewhat. But anyway, that class was a a lot of listening. We got to take out tapes from the music library and just learn the different sounds and the progression from old time to bluegrass to country music. And the professor and the teacher's assistant also were musicians themselves. So they kind of just jammed out during class and at the same time taught us different musical techniques related to those musical styles. So that kind of inspired me. And growing up, my aunt, my father's sister, she was in possession of my their father's mandolin, and just kind of sitting on a chair in her living room. But whenever we visited her, I was kind of always drawn to it. And eventually, it wasn't actually that particular mandolin, but at the time, someone I was living with had a mandolin that I just kind of picked up and started to learn. I listened to a lot of, I have to say, Old and in the Way, which is Jerry Garcia and David Grisman are in that, and those sounds kind of drew me into wanting to learn the mandolin.
I didn't realize it was a tradition in your family.
Yeah.
Now, did the timing work out that you got to try out the mandolin when was it your grandfather, you said? Well, he was alive and playing?
Unfortunately not. And now that you mention it, my father has a lot of old reel-to-reels, and I heard him or his sister play the piano on one of them. So I should ask him if he has any, his father playing the mandolin.
Oh, okay. Yeah. These are audio recordings.
They are. Yep. Yes.
How tremendously valuable. That's really important. Yeah. But still, you grew up in a family then that had a musical tradition and a sense of music. And while they may have disagreed on which type of music, music was important.
Yes.
And underwritten and supported by generations in your family. I'm glad to hear that. I think that's really, really wonderful. So you were playing the mandolin after college, it sounds like.
Yes.
And in college, did you? I'm sorry, you took that class. Were you playing the mandolin by the time you took that class?
I was not, actually. I have to admit that for whatever reason, I ended up not really playing music in college.
So you're out of college. You're picking up the mandolin. Did you find people to play with?
The first time I actually found people to play with was shortly after I moved to the Catskills.
Oh, okay.
And I moved here knowing only a couple people, one of whom included Peter Letterman, who he used to be Tremperskill Boy as well. And he and my mother actually worked together 40-something years ago in Long Island, or Queens, I think. And so they have our families have known each other for that long. And he lives in Andes. And when I first moved here, he had told me about John Jacobson having I believe at that point it was a weekly jam at his house. And he had dinner, and it was, he said, why don't you join us one week? So I figured that would be a good way to start. And I have to say the transition from the woodwind instrument to string wasn't easy, because with the woodwind, you just have to know one note at a time, whereas the mandolin, you kind of have to know chords, multiple notes. And I had, a little trouble memorizing chords, so I just crammed all these chords from a chord book I had and hoped that I would know enough to be able to play some basics. And sure enough, during that I believe it was the first week, it might have been the second week, but John said we were actually asked to play a gig at the Andel Inn, which is a few miles up the road from John's house. And so should we form a band? And I'm pretty sure that's where we came up with the name, because I don't believe there was a name before that. So it was kind of I was like, well, thank you for trusting me enough to be able to play in a band after only playing with you for a week or two. But I think it went pretty well. So I'm still playing together 10 years later.
Well, we're moving right along, and we still haven't reached the end of the list of instruments that you have tackled and mastered. And so you were playing mandolin, you were playing accompaniment with the Tremperskill Boys.
Mm-hmm.
You weren't trying to pick out the melody, were you, or did?
I wasn't really, just because I was kind of new, and I kind of fell into the accompaniment pattern, which is fine. On my own, I try to practice a little more melody, so maybe eventually I could contribute more. But now I am mainly playing the bass with the Tremperskill Boys, which is a lot of fun. I really enjoy it. And
I'm sorry, say that again. It's the
stand-up bass.
Mm-hmm.
I have been playing with the Tremperskill Boys, and I actually kind of fell into that because my boyfriend Joel Murray, who is a bass player himself, he plays with the Stoddard Hollow string band. He was in the process of getting a new bass himself, and he had a half-size bass that he was looking to part with. And I know with the Tremperskill Boys, we had talked about we were starting to do square dances at the time, and they were looking for a more solid bass section. So I figured a stand-up bass would hopefully be able to provide that, and so time-wise, it worked out perfectly. So I picked up the bass from Joel, and he gave me a few lessons himself, which was very helpful, because otherwise I wouldn't have known what I was doing. So thanks to Joel. But yeah, so I picked that up, and I'm trying to remember how many, probably about 7 years, I think now.
It seems about right.
Yeah.
Well, I can tell you, as a member of the Tremperskill Boys, the bass that we hear you playing is just really key to our success. So thank you for taking up yet another instrument.
Thank you.
And
Thanks for giving me the opportunity, because I feel like if I hadn't met you guys, I probably, this wouldn't be happening. I don't think so. I definitely appreciated the opportunity to join you guys.
Yeah, I think we all feel that we were given a wonderful opportunity, and I agree with you. So you've been playing the bass for 7 years or so in the Tremperskill Boys, and we'll get to the Tremperskill Boys in just a minute. But I'd like to ask you, before we do, what other musical involvements have you had since? You've kind of told us up through high school, and that you weren't involved so much. You decided not to. You had an opportunity to play the dreaded bassoon. I decided not to. So, and then you were doing the mandolin pretty much on your own when you joined Tremperskill Boys. So what other opportunities to play have you gotten into other than the Tremperskill Boys?
Right. Well, there's a local group called the Delaware Dulcimers, who I joined probably 5 years ago. And Chris Carey, the banjo player for us in the Tremperskill Boys, he plays with and Sheila Addison as well. She plays the hammer dulcimer with the dulcimers, and I think at this point she is the only dulcimer player in the dulcimers, so we're lucky to have her. And with them, I play the mandolin and the flute, so I'm happy to get to still continue playing those instruments. And then more recently, I've joined the Delhi Community Band, and we play at unfortunately this year, all of our events were canceled due to coronavirus, but last year we played at the Meredith Dairy Festival. And then every Friday in Delhi, they have a fair on the square, in the courthouse square there, and we play for an hour every Friday at Fair on the Square. So, yeah.
Well, that's wonderful. You have 3 groups that you play with currently.
Yes, and yes, I should mention, on occasion, when Joel Murray can't be playing with the Stoddard Hollow string band, for example, one St. Patrick's Day, he was snowed in.
Oh,
believe it or not.
yeah.
And he lives on a pretty rugged road. He said, I don't know if I'll be able to make it off my hill to play. So I sit in with the Stoddard Hollow String Band.
Oh.
He can't make it, so that's fun too.
Do you and Joel ever play together?
We actually did start a band ourselves. We call ourselves Cake for Breakfast. And we played one gig. And we have the same gig scheduled for our, it was an event that's an annual event. But again, with the coronavirus, we're not sure whether it's going to be happening this year.
Mm-hmm.
But we're just trying to write some more songs and play together just on our own. So hopefully when things get back to normal, maybe we can actually play out.
We're always already looking forward to getting back to normal. And I think this has been particularly hard for musicians who are so used to playing with each other and shaping what they play by the person sitting next to them or across the group from the group.
Exactly.
And playing by yourself ain't the same, is it?
No.
Yeah.
And a friend and I were actually going to try to do, I'm trying to also learn the ukulele. My sister got me as a birthday present a few years ago, build your own ukulele kit.
Uh-huh.
And she was like, oh, you should make this and bring it to, actually I think it was a Hanukkah present. She said, bring it to the family Hanukkah party. It was a lot more involved than what she thought.
Mm-hmm.
And Joel, and he might have gotten some assistance from a woodworking friend of his, but anyway, he built this mandolin for me.
Mm-hmm.
Finally have it, and I'm trying to learn that too.
Mm-hmm.
But my friend and I were going to try to do a Zoom ukulele session, but
a Zoom ukulele session. Right.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see if it works out.
Okay, so far we've got piano, flute, mandolin, bass, bassoon, ukulele. Pretty amazing. The number. I think mainly the talent is your talent to pick up an instrument and figure it out and be able to play on it. That's just remarkable. So, you mentioned learning that when you and Joel perform, that you're preparing new songs, your own songs to play in your duo, and that's a whole different thing than playing old-time songs that you've either learned by ear or found in one of the old-time tune books, and those are both ways Tremperskill Boys learn tunes. And I'm wondering what styles of music or what types of music you've enjoyed playing. You said that your college experience with the country and bluegrass class was significant. What are your favorite types of music to listen to, and what are your favorite types to play?
I would have to say I think bluegrass is probably my favorite to both listen to and play, because it's, I think as far as playing, there are, to be truthful, a limited number of chords used, and you could do an amazing amount with a limited amount of chords. I've been going to a bluegrass festival called Gray Fox Bluegrass Festival, which isn't too far from here. It's in East Durham, New York. And it's, in addition to having a ton of bands playing throughout the weekend that you can watch, almost everybody brings an instrument themselves. And so a lot of the draw of the festival is to just walk through the campgrounds and either listen to people playing at their campsites, which some of whom are actual bands elsewhere, others who just walk around and join random groups and just start a random group there. We have finally worked up the courage to do that ourselves. We brought our instruments around. Actually, last year, I didn't really want to lug the monster, as I call it, the bass around. But fortunately, somebody had one. So why don't you come over? And he was looking for a bass player, which I guess maybe isn't the most common instrument around. But so fortunately, he had another instrument to play himself, and Joel had brought his guitar with him. So yeah.
So you
So,
sat in.
yeah.
Yeah, at the
Yeah.
campsite.
Yeah, exactly. So those are, a lot of fun just to attend. I also, I do like, I guess what you could call jam band music, like Fish and String Cheese Incident. I know that's a silly name, but they're one of my favorites. And but both of them do have, bluegrass is one of their influences. So, but they go into a lot of different genres, jazz, rock and roll, some classical, and they're just kind of goofy, fun bands too. They just have they gather a great following, and kind of people kind of go from city to city to see them. And you could see them 2 nights in a row, 3 nights in a row, and they'll play a totally different show each night. Wow. So I definitely like that as well. You're getting something new. Yeah.
So, what's your second favorite?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Do you like country and western?
I do a little. I guess I'm starting to like more of the radio stuff. I feel like it's maybe some of it's a little too poppy for me, or formulated or whatever. But I like the older time country music. I have to say, yeah.
The old time.
Yeah.
Okay. Like Tremperskill Boys play.
Exactly. Yeah, and music that a lot of different bands play, but everybody has their own take on it. And, people who are in the audience can obviously recognize that music, sing along if they know it.
That's true, they do.
That's appealing. Yeah.
Lots of our square dancers sing along with the singing calls also.
Yeah. That's true. It's amazing that we have so many people in our area that have that tradition, because calling is not an easy thing to do.
No, we are fortunate, and we're fortunate in the Tremperskill Boys to have 2 fiddlers who are also callers.
Right.
Really. How did you come to Tremperskill Boys? You said that Peter Letterman invited you to join what was at that time a jam at John's house.
Right.
And it almost immediately turned into a band with a gig, and so you found yourself playing the mandolin.
Right. Okay. Right. And then we kind of, I think our second gig was at the Andes. There's an outdoor pavilion, and somebody wrote a check out to the Tremperskill Boys. So we decided, well, we have to form a partnership now. So we actually had to form a legal partnership so we could get a bank account, because otherwise, what do we do with the check made out to the Tremperskill? So since then, I've kind of become the bookkeeper for the band.
So let's talk about the Tremperskill Boys. The band does both concerts and square dances.
Right.
And do you have a preference of which kinds of performances the band does?
I have to say the square dances are a lot of fun to play. They, because you get a lot more audience participation, obviously. People are generally very, sometimes it takes a little while for people to join in. But after they hear a couple tunes, it's hard not to get up and want to dance. So, and we've gotten a wide range of people, some who have had no experience, maybe people who are in the area for the weekend, or family members visiting, family members who live in the Catskills from out of town. So, just plus we have a bunch of, as I mentioned before, a lot of people who grew up square dancing. So it's nice to have that mix, because while we're playing, I know you yourself do sometimes have to jump off of the flute and play the role of the teacher, but sometimes on occasion we have enough dancers that can kind of take that role on themselves, which is nice.
Yeah. And how does that affect you as a musician?
For square dances, I find myself trying to watch the audience more than necessarily the other musicians, if that makes sense, because I try to, I know you and I yesterday were talking about rhythm and trying to keep steady, but when you have a group dancing, sometimes you have to adapt more to the speed of the dancers. So I try to kind of watch what they're doing and hopefully convey that through the bass to the band to try to keep the rhythm at a good pace for dancers, if that makes sense. And concerts too, you know, sometimes at concerts we play some slower tunes and stuff like that too, but it's nice to see people really get into that. Like John Jacobson wrote a song and it's very moving, you know, lyrically. You see people kind of even get tears in their eyes on occasion, so that's nice to see. It's really nice to see. So it's nice to get that, you know, be able to play more serious, slow music as well. Just
and I think a future for Tremperskill Boys includes more recognizable tunes and self-composed tunes. You know,
right.
I think there's a role in traditional music for innovation as well. So I'm really happy when John will sing Red Hill. It is a wonderful song, and I hope there'll be more. Best about Tremperskill Boys, what do you think? Either it's done for you over the long haul, or the reason it has succeeded over the long haul. Either one or both.
Yeah. I think for me personally, as I had said previously, I don't know whether I would have had the opportunity to play, you know, in a band publicly, you know, more not make a 100% living out of it, but you know, make a profession out of it somehow. If I hadn't found you guys, and definitely that's played a huge role in my life. And it's nice to be able to balance out the office job with a more creative job.
Yeah,
that's definitely helpful to exercise both sides of the brain.
What has it meant to you to play with the Tremperskill Boys?
Well, it's allowed me to grow as a musician, certainly, because as I said, I hadn't really played any stringed instruments before joining you guys, and just from kind of listening and trying to pick up by ear to trying to cram and learn some chords, it's nice to be able to, you know, I feel like I got more of the chords down. Hopefully I can grow a little more into playing more melody if on the mandolin, and maybe on the bass as well. But the bass, I mean, I definitely enjoy holding down a rhythm for the square dance. It's just a fun instrument to play. I'm trying to learn the how to bow the bass. So
okay, that'll be interesting to bring the bow into play.
Yeah, maybe not for the square dances, but for, you know, some of the concerts.
Well, thank you very, very much for participating in Meet the Folk Musicians.